Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Copper Club podcast. Jess and I are still here because there are two Brazilian teams in the quarterfinal of the Club World Cup, which is amazing to see. Hopefully, we get to do another podcast where one of them is into the semi-finals, which would be crazy. But this tournament has been rather unpredictable. But we will try and do our best on this episode to try and find out what's going to happen in those two matches and hopefully provide better predictions than what we did on the previous podcast, especially when it came to Fluminense. But we'll leave them and we'll talk about them in the second part of this podcast. And we're going to lead the charge with Palmeiras versus Chelsea. So an extra special episode for Jess with this particular match. We'll focus on Palmeiras first because it's important to note that they're going to go into this match with a completely different defense. Gustavo Gomes is suspended. He's likely to be replaced by Bruno Fuchs or Mikel. I'm not 100% sure yet. The left back, Joaquin Piqueres, he's also suspended. And Murillo, Abel Ferreira's preferred centre back to partner Gomez, is injured. So we're going to see a completely new look defence going into this match, which I don't want to start off on a negative, but it's important to address that this isn't going to be Palmeiras' strongest 11 against Chelsea, which probably leans more towards Chelsea could win this match. But just talk me through this defence, what Abel Ferreira is potentially going to do, because he's got a few issues to address here, hasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, obviously because he had already lost Murillo, as you mentioned, and Fuchs has been incredible, to be fair. He has been really well adjusted. We saw how he defended like with his head and he just threw himself out, and being able to represent what Palmeiras is about and fighting for the badge and all of that. So he has been really incredible. The thing is, for me, the major issue for Palmeiras has been losing Gomez because of obviously the captain, the leadership that he offers, but also how he is the one to actually organize the defense. And if you're talking about Palmeiras back line, the four, the starting, the starters, both center backs and the fullbacks, Palmeiras can only count on their weakest link, which is the right back in GI. So it's a huge bummer for them in terms of, I think, defensively for Gomez particularly, but also offensively. I always, because I am also a Ceará fan, my mind always goes back to how he scored against Ceará when, Ceará had a perfect, perfect block and we're settled defensively. And it was from a header of him because he knows how to move himself. He managed to just completely do like a body feint and throw his marker away. So he has that quality, much like Thiago Silva, to read the ball. So I think it's going to be a huge miss. And also Piqueres, which I think is also one of the reasons why we've been seeing Estevao on the left so much, is because of the differences in the fullbacks and what they offered. And maybe to partner him with Piqueres, we have been seeing him on the left during this Club World Cup, as opposed to the right, where he is, the best version of himself, in my opinion. And so they do lose a lot of threat also on the counter with his speed. So it's going to be very interesting to see how Abel addresses all of that, being that he is also very conservative with his choices in terms of the players that he trusts. So I'm kind of anxious to see what he's going to do. But obviously, as you mentioned, this is an opportunity for Chelsea. And if you're a club that's going up against Palmeiras at this stage, then you have to take, that into account. And you have to go with this different mentality of, we must win, right? You have to win, because this is an opportunity if you're talking about a club playing against them.
Yeah, because I don't think the replacements, if you look at it on paper, the replacements aren't bad. If Vandalen comes in on the left-hand side, whether he will partner with Estevao, which we'll talk about very soon, and then Bruno Fuchs, as you said, his defensive header on that line in the last minute against Botafogo just shows how dedicated he is. So the replacements are adequate, but this is a backline which I've looked through, and I don't think the predicted backline have ever played 90 minutes together. Yeah. And then the first time they are coming together is against Chelsea in a quarterfinals of a major tournament. So Palmeiras, who, as we've expressed so many times, Abel Ferreira knows how to win ugly. He knows how to shut up shop, but he's going to have to maybe rethink his strategy for this particular match. And maybe he's going to have to put more emphasis on his attacking players in order to actually, they're probably going to have to score 1 or 2 in this match to even take it to extra time. So it's the obvious place to start. We'll talk about Estevao and his tournament where you said passionately on the last podcast that we didn't want to keep seeing him on the left-hand side. He does his best work on the right. How do you think Abel Ferreira is going to use him in this game? Because it's a head scramble for him, because obviously he's going to be moving to Chelsea. He's going to want to impress, but these are his teammates in a matter of weeks. Do you feel that Abel Ferreira will be bold enough to play him in his best position, or do you think that he's going to take him out of the picture as a whole?
It's complicated because I think if you look at their last match against Botafogo, in my opinion, and in many, by the time that Estevão left during the second half, he was their biggest threat at that point. And I think everybody was a little bit confused why he left so early. Alan wasn't performing that well during the match, and it was weird because he was their only outlet at that point, even though he was playing as you quote unquote out of position, or at least not in his preferred position or where he does his best work, being that he is left footed. So, I think it would be much like Abel to start him on the left again, to start him and play him on the left and go with Alan. Pretty much like the same setup that we saw against Botafogo. But for some reason, I can actually see a scenario where Estevão starts on the bench. I think because of the context and everything going outside of the pitch. Obviously, we know about the interview where he said that it's been harder and harder to focus, being so close to his move away. A lot of fans didn't take it that well. Abel, personally, I mean, if I had to bet, I would say he hasn't taken that well as well, which for me is silly. So I can see, because of the off the pitch conundrum kind of affecting this, his decision, and thinking that it would be best for his team to have a different player that could, I don't know, maybe focus the way that he wants or do what he wants. And so I can see him starting on the bench. My expectation is still that he starts on the left, but I would not be surprised if he didn't start at all, to be honest.
Well, he's got something to think about, because Paulinho could easily come into that position. I know he doesn't play best out wide. He has been phenomenal as a second striker. And for more context, for people who are seeing Paulinho for the first time, moves across to Bayer Leverkusen, and it may have looked like it was flawed or it wasn't a good move for him. But he came out and did an open, honest interview that he was like pigeonholed out of position on the left-hand side. But he came back to Brazil and became the top goal scorer in the league with Mineiro, and now Palmeiras and Abel Ferreira have bought him for big money and came up with a big moment, which was probably worth his transfer fee to get over the line against Botafogo, cutting in from the right-hand side and guiding the ball into the back of the net. And on the last episode, Jess, I asked you, should Vitor Roque be dropped for Flaco Lopez? Well, it could be a case of Paulinho's coming in to lead the charge. What do you think? Because Vitor Roque has been really disappointing, where Paulinho and Flaco Lopez have shown so much more in goal. Off the bench, yes, but both have been incredibly confident, and Abel Ferreira needs a goal.
Yeah, this is very interesting because, once again, I think it involves stuff off the pitch as well. There's been this rumor going around within Palmeiras fan base that there's been a bust up between Abel and Flaco Lopez, and that would explain why he didn't start and why Vitor Roque start again, because as we've seen, he didn't have once again, he didn't have a good game. As for Paulinho, I don't think he is fit enough to play or to start. If he starts, I think he can play like 30 minutes, 40 minutes at best. We saw him, he scored, and then right afterwards he was brought off again because he is not in the best physical condition. There's a thing about him having surgery maybe, and there's just a lot of unknown, I think, in terms of the players that he has at his disposal. So I think it might be a case of whether he can overcome this issue with Flaco to start Flaco or to start Vitor Roque again, because I honestly do not think that Paulinho can play right now for a lot of minutes, and definitely not with the weather and the conditions that they're currently in the Club World Cup. So I could see Paulinho much more being like this impact sub of sorts, much like he was against Botafogo, or maybe since the match against Botafogo, he was able to regain some sort of a form where he can play at least like for the first half, and he can start and then come out after the second, at halftime. So it's something. There are a lot of unknowns when you look at this Palmeiras side because of this. Extra field stuff, right? Because if you're looking at just who's performing and who's on form, it seems very obvious that Victor deserves to be on the bench, and then you have other alternatives. But it's not that simple because of what's going on behind the scenes. So it's a question that we don't have clear answers to right now. So it's just going to be interesting to see what he chooses to do.
One player who will be on the team sheet, Richard Rios, who we debated again on the last episode, but he stepped up. He was wonderful against Botafogo. Going forward, I have no problems with Richard Rios. I think he's unbelievable the way in which he picks the pass. He's aggressive when he needs to be. It's going to be an interesting battle against Chelsea. We saw him play so well at Copa America for Colombia last year, and I'm surprised nobody picked him up then. But this is a real chance for Richard Rios to show that he can compete with a top European side in the middle of the park, and he is an all-rounder. Yes, I think he's so much better as an 8, but this is his chance to really put his stamp on who he is and get that move potentially to Europe, whoever that may be. But Richard Rios, I think just a word or two on him, Jess, in terms of how do you think he will deal against the top class midfield, against the likes of Caicedo, against the likes of Enzo? How do you think he's going to cope?
I think he has a real chance here, as I mentioned, because Caicedo is suspended. So Caicedo won't be able to play, which
There's my good
obviously
research.
whoever comes in. Yeah. No, but I think like whoever comes in, there's again a lot of questions about Chelsea because we don't know whether or not Maresca is going to trust like the likes of Andre, or if he's going to try Reece James in midfield. So that's an area where there's a lot of question marks when it comes to the lineup in Chelsea. But no matter what, when you miss Caicedo, it completely shifts the dynamic of Chelsea's midfield. And if you're looking at Richard Rios and the fact that he is almost the heart of the team, if you're looking at that match against Botafogo, he is the outlet. He was the thinker, the one that was always trying to do something. And the idea that you're not going to have a Caicedo on him, it makes me as a Chelsea fan a little bit uneasy, but I also think it will give him an extra boost. And obviously, as you mentioned, being from South America, he has played against Enzo before. And so I think he'll be very comfortable, as well as I think the partnership with Martinez works really well and has been working really well in the Club World Cup in terms of Martinez ensuring that Rios has the space and the ability to go forward a little bit and to connect the defense and the attack. And I think that's something that Chelsea is going to need to be very careful with, is how you make sure that the ball does not leave his feet, for him to find the outlets like the wingers. Sometimes you see him going straight to the wingers and doing that long pass or dribbling. So it's someone that's, for me personally, even more than Estevao, is the one that from a Chelsea perspective, I want us to be on point and just to ensure that he doesn't have the time or the space to think.
I missed that Caicedo was suspended there. It must have been that 2-3 hour gap between finishing the Benfica game.
Yeah.
But one more player I want to bring up before I ask you more about the prediction for this match. And we haven't touched upon him. I don't think we have yet. We definitely didn't in the last episode. But this is Mauricio, who has impressed me since Internacional. He's come to Palmeiras. And I think every team needs a Mauricio. He's finding those pockets of space. He runs all day. He's a menace, but he has that quality in the final third. And I think Abel Ferreira rates him so highly. But he's one player even ourselves haven't brought up or haven't spoken about. And he had a really good opportunity against Botafogo with a glancing header. He just knows how to find areas inside the box. Not quite Phil Foden-esque for a European audience, but he has that mentality in and around that the opponent's box. And he's a player who could cause Chelsea some damage. Jess, are you a fan of Mauricio? Are you worried about Mauricio?
Whenever Chelsea are playing, I'm worried about everyone. So let's just put this out there. But if I'm trying to be like objective, I don't think he is a player like, let's say with Rios. I'm much more concerned about Rios as I am when you're talking about Mauricio. I remember when I first started seeing like the names and lineups, and I remember being angry. I'm like, no, he's playing Estevao on the left to be able to play Mauricio on the right because it makes no sense. But then obviously, as you mentioned, he allowed Mauricio to be much more, occupying the central areas, which to me made a lot more sense, and also adds the physicality aspect, which if you had someone like Estevao who also likes to cut inside, you kind of lack a little bit. So it makes sense for me. I do, as I said, I do think that he's going to repeat what he did against Botafogo and have Estevao, Mauricio, and Alan, or maybe Torres for Estevao or something, depending on what he does there, as we talked about. But I think he is a good player, and I think it's going to be very interesting to see the battle in midfield. I think that's where the game is going to be won. And it's also interesting because of the questions that we have with Chelsea and the defense. Obviously, the defense of Palmeiras is lacking a lot of players, but Chelsea's midfield right now is also lacking a lot of players. So it's going to be interesting to see how it all like comes together. I think we're going to have a much more clear view, obviously, when we have the lineups and then be able to give a proper prediction. Because right now, I think there are more questions than answers.
Well, I was going to ask you how you saw the game going, but you stumped me a little bit there by sitting firmly on the fence, because I'm trying to see where Palmeiras can win this match, and I think they have to change their tactics slightly from what we've seen because of the makeshift defense. Will that make them slightly more vulnerable? There's a question mark around it. And as you said, I think it is going to be one in the middle of the park, and it's going to be very interesting to see how Estevao, who hasn't hit his heights yet in this tournament, how he approaches this game, because he said he was shell-shocked to play against Messi on the pitch, but against Chelsea, this is going to be a real opportunity to be like, I am worthy of starting within this team and being in and around the squad for next season. So it could go one or two ways for Estevao. It'll be quite an incredible story if Estevao scores the winner in this match. But I think it's going to be tight. I think it's going to be tight, even with the changes in defence. I think the players who have come in, especially Bruno Fuchs, I think how dedicated he was against Botafogo. I still think Abel Ferreira will know how to sort of frustrate Chelsea at times. Maybe they edge it ahead, but it's not going to be a walk in the park, as we've seen with all the Brazilian teams in this competition. So, Jess, if you're not going to give me a prediction, we can move on to the Fluminense Al Hilal game.
No, but I can actually not give a prediction, but just let the fans like look out for something. The listeners look out for something when a lineup comes. It's because, as we talked about, Caicedo is suspended, and there are now question marks about whether or not Lavia is fit because he has missed training for 2 straight days. So that's what I mean when I talk about there are a lot of unknowns in midfields. Obviously, Chelsea have the likes of Asugo and Andre, young players, but Maresca hasn't really played them, and we've seen Maresca try Reece James in midfield before. So the thing is, whether or not Malo Gusto is going to be in the squad, because if Malo Gusto is in the squad, then he most likely will be playing right back, and that would mean that Reece James is in midfield. And for me, that would leave Chelsea with weaknesses to be exploited, in which is something that Flamengo did really well, which is the ball over the top, and then by Malo Gusto side at right back, which is not very good in the air. And we saw that for 2 out of the 3 games that Flamengo scored against Chelsea. So just keep up your eyes looking for that to happen or not. I sincerely hope that doesn't happen and Reece James is started as the right back, and then Maresca can, be brave and play like Andre in midfield, because I think that would make us very, if you have an Enzo-Andre partnership in midfield, that would make me feel a lot more comfortable. But it's actually not what I'm expecting to happen. I'm expecting to be very anxious with Maresca's choice. So just going to have to see. But that would be, I think, a very easy thing for Palmeiras to pinpoint. If Malo Gusto is he's a good player, by the way. He's not like a bad player, but it's one of his weaknesses, and it's something that we've seen exploited before. He's also not someone that knows how to invert very well, which is something that Maresca likes. So it's just like a point for Palmeiras to be, which is something, if you're talking about Reece James, it's harder to look at weaknesses. And so, for instance, I'm expecting Estevao to play on the left. So obviously that will leave him up against the right back. And if you're Palmeiras fans, a Palmeiras fan, you want him to play against Malo Gusto and not Rhys James, I would assume, or not against Cucurella if he's playing on the right. So it's just something that we can look. And me as a Chelsea fan can hope that, I will be hoping that it does not happen.
Both teams don't have certain players within the team. Maybe that's going to make it a bit more of a level playing field. It's definitely going to be one to tune into. But let's move across to Fluminense versus Al Hilal in the quarterfinals. I can't believe I'm saying that Fluminense and Al Hilal in the quarterfinals. I think that makes the tournament great. I know some people are going to be against it, but look, Fluminense, let's start with how they performed against Inter Milan. They were excellent. I know we didn't give them a chance. I certainly didn't give them a chance. I was worried about who was going to score the goals. And of course, Herman Cano rolled back the years at 37 and scored within the first few minutes. But I think that helped them out perfectly. Taking an early lead, I think they were perfect in terms of sitting with the three at the back, as you said, with wing backs. Have Thiago Silva there, who we'll get onto very soon, to just lead by example. I know you said about Palmeiras and Gustavo Gomez, but Thiago Silva is just on another level, isn't he? He was unbelievable in that Inter Milan game. Just even his calm headers, knowing where that's the one thing which I think most people didn't see was when Inter Milan were throwing balls into the box, which I don't understand why they were doing that anyway. But he was noticing where his defensive midfielders were and was just nodding to them, even though an Inter Milan player was 4 or 5 yards away. He trusted himself to guide that ball perfectly to his teammate and then reset again. Like, it wasn't just his setting up of the other defenders in and around him. It was just his confidence and aura, which we've seen for years and years. But to do it at this age, in this heat, in this tournament, was just perfection. And most people may have seen this across social media, but it's really important to address how when it was the final cooling break, still at 1-0, it was Thiago Silva who stood up and said, no, we should be going 5-4-1 here. Jhon Arias, another player who we'll definitely talk about, to go up front, and Everardo onto the wing and utilise it in that way. And Renato Gaucho turned around and went, okay, let's try it. Let's see if it works. And it did work. So Thiago Silva has got a coaching career ahead of him. I don't think that will surprise people who have been close to him over the years. And Renato Gaucho did say at the end of that match, if you don't know who we were before the tournament, you definitely do now, which was great to see, because Fluminense coming into this with the smallest budget out of all the Brazilian teams, for them to be at this stage of the tournament is massively impressive. They know how to set up. They know how to frustrate teams. Al Hilal is going to be a completely different beast to what they faced with a maybe leggy, tired Inter Milan. But I know we said a few kind words about Thiago Silva on the last podcast, but Jess, take the floor, because that performance against Inter Milan was just fantastic, wasn't it?
I can talk about Thiago Silva for hours and hours. And I think when you have a player that is an idol and considered a legend throughout every club that he has been, AC Milan, PSG, Chelsea, Fluminense, it's just a testament to the quality of a player that he is and how he connects with the club and what he does on the pitch. He is a maestro. He is a maestro at centre back. So it's just a joy to watch. I think I've talked about this expression before. A Brazilian expression that means playing wearing a suit. It's almost, and that's what he does. He plays wearing a suit. He oozes class. He knows what's going to happen before it happens. And I think that's how he has been able to play for so long, and he's still playing at 40. And I think a lot of clubs will look at, I would take a 40-year-old Thiago Silva in my club right now. And the leadership and the quality that he adds is unbelievable. As you mentioned, someone that's studying to become a manager, a coach. He has been doing his courses since he was at Chelsea. He has been, taking and studying. He also posts a lot of imagery and videos of him studying and getting to know the game more. And it translates on the field. I mean, how incredible he is and hard worker and committed to what he does as a center back, and the leadership, as you say, to understand what's going on, and also the respect that all those players gave him and continue to give him on the pitch, off the pitch. It's just fantastic. And for us, it's just a luxury to be able to watch him play and for so long, and to see him continue to perform at that level. It's just incredible to see.
He was moments away from playing in Serie B, and now he could be in the semi-finals of the Club World Cup. It's a funny old game, isn't it? But
Yeah.
Thiago Silva, excellent at the back, but the person going forward, who we talk about time and time again, Jhon Arias. What a performance against Inter Milan. The calmest and most composed person in the stadium. I just thought we said that Thiago Silva oozed class, but I was laughing whilst I was watching Jhon Arias at times because he had 3 or 4 players around him. He knows not to make that decision too early. He waits for someone who's hounding him, the opponent, to make his move, to make it easier for him to slide out of sticky situations. But he does it so casually as well. I think it almost winds up the opponents as to how lethargic it seems to be. But he knows when he can go from first to fifth gear if he's slowing it down the channel whilst he's waiting for his players. Because this is an aging Fluminense side to get up the pitch when they're under quite a lot of pressure. He's the perfect player to win a foul, run up the channel, bide a bit of time. But then he was the one who created that first goal. Yes, he may have got a little bit of luck when the ball fell to Herman Cano, but my word, if he doesn't have a flood of offers put in front of him at the end of this Club World Cup, then maybe I don't understand football, because Jhon Arias is just unbelievable. I think he could go to Europe. I think he could play for a top team in Brazil. Fluminense wouldn't be at this stage of the competition without him. And Al Hilal will have to try and contain him somehow. But Inter Milan were putting 2 or 3 players on him, and he was just making a mockery of them. So Jhon Arias, obviously he's the key, isn't he, Jess, to this success? But come on, how good was he against Inter Milan?
Yeah, you mentioned about how he always had like 2 players, 3 players, and it was not like no play. It was like Bastoni. Bastoni was on him with Mkhitaryan. It was just that level of player, and he just manages to, I mean, we've talked about him so much. I mean, there's not much more to say other than just watch him, enjoy him. As you mentioned, there are the extra factors of him being settled in Brazil and his family, but I would also be very surprised because we've talked about Richard Rios, and he already started being linked with a move away. Still haven't heard anything on Arias, but I mean, I'm bracing myself because he has been outstanding. He is their outlet. We've talked about how maybe we underrated Fluminense a little bit, but I don't actually think that we did, because we always said that they have a very, very good defense. The problem is they don't know how to score goals because they only have Jhon Arias with Cano not in good form. And I think that's still true. You mentioned looking at how they score their goals. It was a moment of magic from Arias with a little bit of luck, and then the header. And that's how they do. So I still think that they move forward with the same problems. They're going to need a moment of magic from Jhon Arias or a header from someone, free kick, corner, to be able to score, because otherwise it's very tough to look at the squad and think and see where the goals are coming from. But obviously I expect them to repeat the 3 at the back. We've talked about Thiago Silva, but we also talked about Ignacio when Thiago didn't play, and he came on for him and he did a really good job. And now having the 2 of them together at the back 3, just adding that much more solidity. I will be very surprised if they don't stick with the back 3 formation against Al Hilal. So I think they're going to have problems to score as well, because I do not watch a lot of, obviously, Saudi. It's not a league that I follow closely. I just watch bits and pieces and see. I mean, I don't really have the time or means to watch the league that closely. But I do know that they struggle against low blocks. So it's going to be very interesting, because you have a club that, doesn't have a lot of success when talking about a low block, and that just came out of a huge win against Manchester City, who obviously play very open, very forward. But then you have, on the other hand, a club that struggles to score. And I would continue to say that they do struggle to score. So it's just, it's funny. It's going to be a funny game. And I'm actually very excited to see what happens.
Yeah, I think we spoke about suspensions for Palmeiras, and I think it's important to note is that Fluminense's preferred left back, Rene, he's suspended for the tie as well. So it makes it a little bit more interesting to see who comes in to replace him. Where Al Hilal will probably look to win this game, I'm going to bring up the 2 Brazilians, Malcolm and Marcos Leonardo, who were fantastic against Manchester City. I think Al Hilal are so good going forward, and they play better against the team who want to replicate that, as we saw against Man City. but they're going to try to find those half spaces in between that, say that left centre back and the left back who comes in. That's where they're going to have success. And we know, and Fluminense will know, Marcus Leonardo is such a good poacher. Yes, his goals weren't incredible against Man City, but he was just in the right place at the right time. And that's exactly what he does. So he's going to be a threat. It's a shame we don't get to see Mitrovic versus Thiago Silva, because that would be a matchup and a half. But if I'm going to look to see where Fluminense can win this match, because I need to speak more positively about them. They're in the quarterfinals. I can't keep saying they're going to get knocked out. But where you said there about set pieces, Al Hilal against Man City were dreadful against set pieces and balls into the box. That's where Man City had their luck. And you said on the last podcast that Ignacio had come in inside, well, next to Thiago Silva. Now, watching Fluminense's routines against Inter Milan, it was rather simple, but very effective. They looked for Thiago Silva, who looked to nod it back in. And then Ignacio, he did score, but he was offside to go 2-0 up inside the first half. But it worked 2 or 3 times. It troubled Inter Milan. If it's troubling Inter Milan, it's likely to trouble Al Hilal, who looked really vulnerable from set pieces. This could be, it's weird to say, but because Fluminense don't score, but if Al Hilal can't defend set pieces, where Fluminense are quite good, but Al Hilal have the Brazilians in the other side of the pitch to be able to score, does this game feel like it? The more I'm talking about it to you, I feel like it could be a scoreline which gets out of hand again, which is ridiculous to say when it comes to Fluminense. But before we sort of sign off for the podcast and stuff, Jess, your prediction for the Chelsea Palmeiras game, I'm with you. It's difficult. We need to see lineups. We've tried to give our audience as much information as possible. Fluminense versus Al Hilal, I think, is an incredibly difficult game to piece together. I'll be bold and I'll go first. I think this is potentially going to be the end of the road for Fluminense. They've given it one hell of a shot. I don't think you can rely on just set pieces alone to get you through. Will they be able to get an early goal and sit back against Al Hilal, who score for fun? It's a very difficult question. It's a very difficult thing for them to do. So it might be the end of the road for them, but they've been incredibly impressive. And more light on Brazilian football, Thiago Silva bossing it at 40, Jhon Arias appreciation, and may get his move to Europe eventually if he wants it. But Jess, how do you see this game unfolding?
I'm actually going to do a repeat of what I did with Botafogo and Palmeiras, because my head was telling me one thing and my heart was telling me another, and this is exactly what's happening right now. Yeah. My head is saying Al Hilal, but I'm actually going to go with Fluminense. I think Fluminense will go through. No reason whatsoever. It's just a feeling. Have that feeling, and I hope I'm right. And obviously, with the Chelsea Palmeiras, I'm going to be honest. I can't give up an objective prediction because I'm just going to say Chelsea because it's what I want to happen. But I think, as you mentioned, a lot will depend on when we see the lineups and we actually can see what the theory is and if theory is going to become reality within the midfield, because I think that's what the battle is going to be won. It's going to be in midfield for this game particularly. So we're just going to have to wait and see what happens on that one.
4 Brazilian teams entered the round of 16. 2 enter the quarterfinals. What we would do to at least see one of them squeeze through to the semi-finals. If they do, Jess and I will be back. Hopefully, we get to do another podcast around the Brazilian teams. Maybe even 2 more, and maybe a winners one. Who knows? We're not going to get too carried away just yet. But we will be back if that is the case. So do keep an eye on Palmeiras versus Chelsea on Saturday, I believe. And then Fluminense Al Hilal is the game on Friday. Hopefully you've learned a little bit more about the players and insight, and you're appreciating Brazilian football. Do remember to subscribe to the podcast across Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. It is free. Jess, any last words? I can see you wagging your finger.
I want to say one thing, because I was thinking about why is my heart telling me that Fluminense is going to win? And I actually think it's because they're aging. As we mentioned, this is a very aging squad, and they need to renew. But at the same time, I think it helps with the mentality. This is our last chance. So if you're talking about Thiago Silva and Samuel Xavier and, the goalkeeper Fabio, it's like, this is what we have. Like, we really must push through. And maybe that's where I'm getting my feeling from. Weirdly enough, ironically enough. We'll see.
We'll see once again. We've got many predictions wrong already from the podcasts we've done, but maybe Fluminense are going to finally go back and win this game, score a few goals finally. I think that's what I was trying to get across there. They've not really done that apart from against the South Koreans. But I think it's going to be what I actually think it's going to be the best game of the round, even looking at the others. Fluminense, Al Hilal, both teams really need to go for it. Maybe we finally see some goals. But yes, hopefully we get to join us again for the semi-finals. If not, we will do a debrief of the Club World Cup across the next episode. So until then, we'll see you very soon.